Good evening. Welcome to tonight's scary bedtime story to help you fall asleep. Please comment below and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. The Crescent Theater slouched at the edge of town, squeezed between a rumbling laundromat and an abandoned diner. The cinema was a relic from another era, predating the gleaming multiplexes that had sprouted across the county. The floors clung to your shoes with each step. The seats sagged with decades of use, and the ancient projectors stuttered at the most crucial moments of any film. Yet patrons still came, lured by bargain ticket prices and the comforting embrace of nostalgia. For Eleanor, it was simply employment, a summer position before university beckoned. Most evenings found her behind the concession counter, dispensing rivers of saccharine soda and mountains of popcorn glistening with artificial butter. Weekend shifts, however, meant closing duties, sweeping the detritus left by careless moviegoers and securing the building until morning. Tonight was one such evening. "Almost finished?" Vincent inquired, leaning against the counter. He was one of the few co-workers Eleanor genuinely appreciated, tall and wiry, with an endless supply of ridiculous jokes that somehow made the tedious shifts bearable. "Nearly," she replied, wiping down the popcorn machine with methodical strokes. "Just need to check the last theater." Vincent groaned sympathetically. "You always draw the short straw on that task." "I know," she sighed. "But at least it should be empty. Won't take long." The final screening had concluded over an hour ago. The theater had fallen into that peculiar silence that only empty entertainment venues possess, broken only by the mechanical whirring of projectors powering down and the occasional metallic complaint from the ancient ventilation system. Eleanor grabbed her broom and made her way toward Theater 6. The door protested with a haunting creak as she pushed it open. Darkness enveloped the space, save for the anemic glow of exit signs. The stale perfume of popcorn permeated the air, mingling with something else, something musty, like fabric left damp too long. Eleanor ignored the peculiar scent and stepped inside, beginning to sweep. Her footsteps echoed strangely in the vacant auditorium. The silence felt wrong, too absolute, too dense. Then she heard it. Laughter. She froze, her grip tightening around the wooden handle. The sound had been faint, distant, like someone chuckling under their breath. Eleanor pivoted toward the source, her eyes adjusting to the gloom. The theater was supposed to be vacant. She had personally observed the last patrons leave. "Hello?" she called into the darkness. Nothing answered. Merely her imagination, she reasoned. Returning to her sweeping, she tried to dismiss the unease crawling along her spine. But then, the laughter again, louder this time. Eleanor whirled around. In the furthest row, in the most remote seat, sat a figure she hadn't noticed before. She hadn't heard anyone enter, hadn't detected the door opening. The stranger sat unnaturally still, posture rigid and unnatural. The crimson emergency lighting barely illuminated his features, but she could discern a smile, too wide, too fixed. His shoulders trembled slightly, as though containing more laughter. Eleanor's stomach constricted with dread. "Sir," she forced out, "the theater is closed for the evening." The figure neither moved nor spoke, just maintained that terrible grin. Then, with a deliberate, almost theatrical motion, he raised his hand and pointed directly at her. Eleanor's breath caught. Her heart thrashed against her ribs as she took an unsteady step backward. I apologize, but you need to leave now," she said, her voice wavering despite her efforts to sound authoritative. Still, the man offered no response. The lights flickered. For a single, terrifying moment, the theater plunged into absolute darkness. When the emergency illumination sputtered back to life, the seat stood empty. Icy dread washed over Eleanor. She scanned the room frantically, but the figure had vanished. The only exit was the door she had entered through. There was no possible way he could have left without passing her. A shiver traveled down her spine. Something was profoundly wrong. She clutched her broom tighter and forced herself toward the exit. She needed to find Vincent. "Vincent?" she called as she stepped into the corridor. Silence answered her. The lobby stood deserted. She checked behind the concession counter, the break room, even the cramped office near the back. Nothing. Then, a sound. Footsteps, slow and measured, emanating from the hallway behind her. Eleanor turned, pulse hammering. A shadow shifted at the distant end of the passage. Not Vincent. Too tall, too still, simply standing there watching her. She retreated a step. The shadow twitched, then surged forward. Eleanor fled, her sneakers sliding across the polished floor. She careened around a corner, nearly colliding with a stack of popcorn containers. Where was Vincent? Where was anyone? She reached the emergency exit and slammed against it. The door refused to budge. Panic clawed at her chest. Something was terribly wrong. She spun around, back pressed against the unyielding door. The corridor stretched before her, momentarily empty, but she knew he was there somewhere, waiting, watching. Then the laughter came again, directly behind her. She barely had time to scream. When Eleanor next became aware, she was sprawled on the floor. Her head throbbed, vision swimming. The hallway appeared empty. Had she fallen? No, someone had seized her. She remembered the rough grip on her wrist, the violent tug, but now, nothing. Eleanor scrambled to her feet. She needed to escape. She staggered toward the lobby, breathing ragged, and then she saw him, standing at the concession counter, still watching. But this time he wasn't alone. Vincent was there too, but he wasn't moving. Eleanor's stomach plummeted. The stranger tilted his head slightly, locking eyes with her. Then, without making a sound, he stepped backward and dissolved into the shadows. Eleanor rushed to Vincent, shaking him frantically. "Hey, wake up!" He groaned, eyelids fluttering open groggily. "What happened?" "I don't know," she whispered, voice trembling. "We need to leave. Now." Together they stumbled toward the entrance. They burst outside into the brisk night air. The street lay empty, the theater behind them dark and silent. Eleanor turned, heart hammering against her ribs. The windows reflected only darkness, no movement, no sign of the stranger. But she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that he remained inside, waiting. And next time, she might not escape. Eleanor resigned the following day. She never set foot in that theater again. Even now, when she recalls that night, she can still hear the laughter echoing in her mind, soft and knowing. The cinema trip wasn't my idea of a perfect Friday night. Babysitting my little brother Zachary and his hyperactive friend Mason, while they bounced off the walls at Premier Plaza Theater, wasn't exactly thrilling. But my parents had insisted, claiming they deserved one evening to themselves. "Just take them to see that cartoon they've been raving about," my mother had said, fastening her gold earrings. "It's only 2 hours, Sophia." Premier Plaza heaved with the weekend crowd, teenagers capturing selfies in the fluorescent lighting, children darting between adults, couples intertwined as though they were at a 5-star restaurant rather than a sticky-floored movie palace. I gripped Zachary and Mason by their shoulders, navigating them through the chaos like a ship through treacherous waters. "Can we check out the arcade first?" Zachary pleaded, eyes wide with anticipation. "Movie first, arcade later," I replied firmly. Mason's face crumpled in disappointment. "But the film doesn't begin for ages." I sighed, feeling my resolve weaken. "Fine, let's get refreshments first." The concession line snaked past glowing cabinets filled with overpriced candy and mountains of buttery popcorn. I scrolled through my phone while we waited, only half listening to the boys' chatter. "I want a blue raspberry slushie," Zachary announced, bouncing on his heels. Mason nodded vigorously. "Same for me." "Whatever, just don't wander off," I muttered, glancing up to check our position in line. They had already drifted away. My heart skipped as I scanned the crowd, finally spotting them several feet away, hypnotized by a towering cardboard display for some superhero franchise. I exhaled sharply. "Stay where I can see you," I called. They barely acknowledged me with a nod. When I finally reached the counter and collected our treats, I turned to find only Zachary standing there, contentedly sipping his slushie. Mason was gone. My stomach plummeted. "Where's Mason?" Zachary barely glanced up from his drink. "He went with that man." Cold fear washed over me, What man? The one who said he had the brand new Cosmic Conquerors game. Zachary replied, casually licking his straw. Mason really wanted to see it, so he followed him. What game? I demanded, my voice trembling. The new Cosmic Conquerors. Mason's been talking about it forever. I bolted down the corridor toward the theaters. The passageway stretched before me, dimly illuminated, with that bizarre, patterned carpet all cinemas seem to share. At the far end, a heavy exit door was just swinging shut. I burst through it into the parking area behind the building. The lot was mostly vacant except for a cluster of vehicles near the perimeter fence. And there, perhaps 20 feet away, stood a tall figure in a dark hoodie, one hand resting on a car door, the other clasping Mason's shoulder. The boy turned toward me, confusion written across his face. I screamed his name. The stranger flinched, then in one swift motion, shoved Mason to the ground, leapt into his vehicle, and accelerated away, tires screeching against the asphalt. I rushed to Mason, trembling violently, struggling to draw breath. "Are you hurt?" I gasped, examining him frantically. Mason sat up, bewildered. "Why did he push me?" I swallowed hard. "He was trying to take you away." Mason blinked, the reality not fully registering. I seized his wrist. "Come on, we're going inside. Now!" The following 20 minutes passed in a blur. I alerted an employee. The manager called the authorities. A crowd gathered in the lobby, whispering anxiously. Zachary continued slurping his slushie while Mason sat on a bench, visibly shaken. I couldn't stop trembling. An officer arrived promptly, taking my statement with practiced efficiency. "Did you manage to see the license plate?" he questioned. I shook my head. "It happened too quickly." Mason finally spoke up. "I thought he was just being friendly," he whispered. The officer crouched before him. "Had you seen this man before?" Mason shook his head. "No, but he said he noticed me playing Cosmic Conquerors on my handheld last week. He told me he had the newest version in his car that I could have." A sickening realization washed over me. The officer frowned deeply. "Where was this conversation?" Mason hesitated. "Here, last time we visited." I froze. This wasn't random. That man had been watching, waiting, planning. After an hour, they allowed us to leave. The officer mentioned reviewing security footage, but I knew the truth. The predator was long gone. Driving the boys home, the weight of what had nearly happened crushed me. If I had taken even a minute longer at the concession stand, Mason would have vanished. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the steering wheel. At home, I pulled Zachary aside. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" He looked down guiltily. "I don't know. I thought Mason was coming right back." I exhaled sharply. He was just a child. He didn't understand. But I did. That man had been stalking Mason for weeks, and he'd almost succeeded. Sleep eluded me that night. Nightmares plagued me. Visions of Mason being dragged into that car, the stranger's hands on his shoulders, the exit door swinging shut as I ran down the corridor, always too slow, always too late. I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding. My phone displayed 4:12 a.m. I wanted to call Mason's mother just to confirm he was safe, but knew that would only increase her anxiety. So I lay there, staring at the ceiling, knowing that Predator was still out there somewhere. The highway stretched endlessly before us, a silver ribbon illuminated only by our headlights and occasional roadside markers. Serena tapped her fingers against the steering wheel in rhythm with the soft music playing through the speakers, while I, Vanessa, reclined in the passenger seat scrolling mindlessly through my phone. Our impromptu road trip wasn't particularly ambitious, just an escape from our routines, a brief holiday from responsibilities and the monotony of daily existence. We'd been inseparable since high school, our friendship the rare kind that required minimal maintenance. We could go months without connecting, yet instantly recapture our rhythm when reunited. Our plan lacked structure: drive across state lines, explore unfamiliar terrain, savor the freedom of open roads. No rigid schedules, no reservations, pure spontaneity. After a full day of driving, exhaustion had begun to settle into our bones. Serena stifled a yawn. "We should find somewhere to crash for the night," I nodded, stretching cramped limbs. Definitely. My body's going numb from sitting too long. A quick search on my phone revealed a modestly priced hotel approximately 20 miles ahead, just off the interstate. The accommodations weren't luxurious, but the reviews seemed respectable, sufficient for our needs. The area surrounding our destination epitomized roadside America. A service station, several chain restaurants, a half-vacant strip mall, and curiously, a movie theater standing sentinel at the parking lot's perimeter. The hotel lobby was dimly illuminated when we arrived. The receptionist barely acknowledged our presence, mechanically processing our information and handing over the room key with detached efficiency. Once settled in our room, we discovered that hours of sitting had left us paradoxically energized rather than fatigued. Serena gazed through the window toward the cinema's luminous marquee. "What do you think about catching a film?" she suggested. I followed her gaze. "A midnight movie feels strangely perfect." We grabbed our wallets and ventured into the cool night air. The theater loomed at the edge of the parking lot, its neon sign flickering sporadically as we approached. Something felt peculiar. Despite being Friday evening, the parking area contained surprisingly few vehicles. We dismissed our unease, attributing it to a slow night. Stepping inside, the disquiet intensified. The lobby presented exactly what one would expect: an expansive concession stand, movie posters adorning the walls, the aroma of popcorn lingering in the atmosphere. Everything appeared ordinary, except for one glaring anomaly: the complete absence of people. No patrons, no employees. Absolute desertion. Serena and I exchanged bewildered glances. "Where is everyone?" she whispered. I had no explanation. We hesitated before advancing further. "Hello?" I called out. Silence answered. The concession stand was fully stocked, popcorn machine brimming with freshly popped kernels, yet no one attended it. The registers sat dormant, untouched. "This is beyond weird," Serena muttered. I swallowed hard, sensing a prickling sensation at the nape of my neck. "Maybe they're in the back?" I suggested, though the words rang hollow even as I voiced them. Serena hesitated before nodding. "Let's check the screening rooms. Perhaps everyone's already watching films." We moved toward the corridor leading to the auditoriums. The carpet muffled our footsteps, making the silence even more oppressive. Serena reached for the nearest theater door and pushed it open. Darkness greeted us, not the ambient glow of a paused projection, but complete, consuming blackness. Goosebumps erupted along my arms. Serena let the door swing shut. "That's deeply unsettling," she whispered. We tried another door, identical result. No screen illumination, no sound, only a gaping void. The unease in my stomach intensified. "Something isn't right," I whispered. We reached the hallway's end, where an emergency exit promised escape. By now, neither of us wanted to retrace our steps through the empty lobby. Without discussion, we pushed through the exit, stepping into the night air. I exhaled with relief. Then Serena clutched my arm, her grip painfully tight. "Vanessa," she breathed. "Look." I followed her gaze back toward the theater. My stomach dropped in horror. The entire building had transformed. Every light, every sign had vanished. Complete darkness enveloped the structure. We hurried to the entrance, pressing against the glass doors. The lobby that had been brightly illuminated moments ago now appeared abandoned. Dust coated the floor, posters hung tattered and faded. The concession stand stood barren. My heart thundered in my ears. Serena yanked the door handle. Locked. Panic clawed at my throat. "How?" she whispered. "We were just inside." I shook my head, mind racing. We hadn't imagined it. We had walked through that lobby, smelled the popcorn, seen the pristine posters. Now it looked as though it had been deserted for years. Without speaking, we hurried back to our hotel, locking the door firmly behind us. We attempted distraction with television, but I doubt either of us absorbed any content that night. Sleep proved elusive. Every creak of the building, every passing vehicle, every faint sound heightened my already frayed nerves. Morning arrived with agonizing slowness. As we checked out, Serena and I exchanged a look, both knowing we needed to investigate one final time. We drove past the theater, and my stomach twisted at the sight. The building stood unmistakably abandoned, not merely closed, but forsaken. Windows clouded with grime, entrance sealed tight, marquee completely blank. Serena grabbed her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she searched for information about the theater. "It says it's been permanently closed for months," she read aloud, voice hollow. Silence fell between us. I stared at the decrepit building, my mind desperately seeking logical explanations. How had we entered? More importantly, who or what had permitted our entry? We didn't linger to discover answers. Serena engaged the ignition, and we departed swiftly, neither speaking until we were miles away. Even now, years later, I cannot explain what transpired that night. I only know with absolute certainty that I never wish to return to that place. I've always cherished cinemas. There's something profoundly comforting about sitting in a darkened theater, the hushed anticipation permeating the air, the ethereal dance of light across the screen. It's solace. Since childhood, theaters have felt like a second sanctuary, places where I could disappear into alternate realities for precious hours. This sentiment never diminished, even in adulthood. 2 years ago, I resided mere blocks from a quaint, independently owned establishment called Monarch Cinema. It wasn't part of any corporate conglomerate, but it possessed undeniable charm, the kind of venue with a softly buzzing neon sign that illuminated the night, where the aroma of freshly popped kernels lingered long after the final showing. It never drew overwhelming crowds, and best of all, I could stroll there whenever inspiration struck. Typically, I attended with companions, but occasionally, when no one was available, I'd venture alone. That night was such an occasion. A film I'd eagerly anticipated was screening, and with no alternative plans, I decided, why not? I donned a sweatshirt, gathered my belongings, and stepped outside. The walk proved peaceful, streets largely deserted save for occasional passing vehicles. The hour was late, but not unreasonably so, the air crisp and carrying distant sounds, a dog's bark echoing from blocks away. By the time I reached Monarch Cinema, the place was nearly vacant. The ticket booth contained only a disinterested teenager scrolling through his phone. I purchased my admission, acquired modest refreshments, and entered the auditorium. The theater was scarcely populated, a couple nestled in the rear, an individual several rows ahead, and a solitary figure off to one side. Perfect. I selected a seat centrally located, not excessively close nor distant, and settled in comfortably. Trailers played, lights dimmed, and for the next 2 hours, I lost myself completely in the narrative unfolding before me. Everything proceeded normally, until suddenly, it didn't. Credits began rolling, soft illumination gradually returned, and I exhaled contentedly. It had been an exceptional film. I gathered my belongings, prepared to depart. Then I sensed it, a presence, a shift in atmospheric pressure behind me. I pivoted slightly, just enough to glance over my shoulder. A man stood directly behind my seat, unnervingly close. I hadn't heard his approach. He was tall, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and unkempt facial hair. His clothing appeared disheveled and mismatched, as though selected with minimal consideration. The odor emanating from him was potent. Stale tobacco mingled with something more acrid, something sour. He was smiling, a peculiar, unsettling expression that failed to reach his eyes. And then, in a voice barely exceeding a whisper, he uttered, "I watched you the entire time." My stomach plummeted. Initially, I remained motionless, staring, my mind frantically processing his words. Perhaps I'd misheard. Perhaps he intended something else entirely. But then he leaned closer. "You were watching the movie," he murmured. "But I was watching you." A raspy chuckle escaped his lips, deliberate, calculated, as though savoring my reaction. Cold dread crawled up my vertebrae. I forced an uncomfortable smile and turned away. My pulse thundered in my ears. "Ignore him. Just leave." I stood, clutching my bag firmly, and walked toward the exit. I resisted the urge to look back, but I could feel his gaze following me. I entered the dimly lit corridor, breathing more rapidly than before. He was merely some creep attempting to unsettle me, I repeated internally. I wasn't in danger. I simply needed to exit, return home, and forget the incident. But then I halted. He was there, positioned near the entrance to the lobby. Though not directly watching me, he stood close enough that I would need to pass him to leave. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I didn't want to walk past him. Then I remembered an alternative route. Having frequented this theater numerous times, I knew that down a quieter passage, beyond the restrooms, an emergency exit led directly to the parking area. Without hesitation, I changed direction. From my peripheral vision, I noticed movement. He had observed my redirection. I didn't pause to confirm whether he followed. I walked faster. The corridor was dimly illuminated and deserted, the only sound being the distant mechanical hum of the theater's ventilation. I reached the emergency door, pushed it open, and stepped outside. The night air felt frigid against my skin. I stood at the parking lot's far end, near the sidewalk leading back to my apartment. I exhaled slowly. I was fine. Everything was fine. I began walking. For several minutes, everything seemed normal. Streets quiet, occasional street lamps flickering. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Soft but unmistakable. Distant yet distinct. My heart stuttered. I didn't immediately turn around, not wanting to appear obvious. Instead, I maintained my pace, listening intently. The footsteps continued, matching my rhythm. Finally, I risked a glance over my shoulder, and my stomach clenched with dread. It was him, maintaining significant distance, but undeniably following me. I forced myself to remain composed. Perhaps coincidence? Perhaps he simply happened to be traveling in my direction. But instinct insisted otherwise. I accelerated. So did he. I turned a corner. A minute later, I glanced back. He had turned too. At that point, every instinct screamed for me to run, to sprint toward my apartment and lock the door securely behind me. But I refused to reveal my panic. I walked briskly. My apartment building materialized ahead. Relief washed over me. Just a little further. I reached the entrance, fumbling nervously with my keys before admitting myself inside. The door closed automatically behind me, locking with a reassuring click. I turned. He remained outside, standing motionless on the sidewalk, staring at the entrance. A tremor coursed through me. He couldn't access the building. I was safe. I ascended in the elevator, entered my apartment, secured the door, and finally released the breath I'd been unconsciously holding. For several moments, I stood frozen, attempting to dispel the lingering fear. Then came a knock, sharp and deliberate. My blood transformed to ice. Cautiously, I approached the door, peered through the peephole, and there he stood. Somehow, he had penetrated the building's security. I clamped my hand over my mouth to suppress a scream. He tested the doorknob. Locked, thank God. He retreated a step and remained there, simply waiting. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I knew immediate action was necessary. Summoning every fragment of courage, I cracked the door open just wide enough to speak. "If you don't leave immediately, I'm calling the police," I declared, forcing firmness into my voice. His expression remained unchanged. Then, gradually, he smiled. After what seemed an eternity, he turned and departed. I observed through the peephole until he vanished completely. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I never encountered him again, but his words, his smile, the way he stood outside my door, these images haunt me still, and I never walk home alone after nightfall anymore. It was meant to be an ordinary night out, a straightforward, relaxed movie date with my girlfriend. Nothing unusual, nothing remotely thrilling, just the kind of tranquil evening we both desperately needed after our hectic weeks. The plan couldn't have been simpler. Select a film, purchase snacks, and lose ourselves in cinematic escapism for a couple of hours. The Majestic wasn't particularly crowded when we arrived, which suited me perfectly. We'd chosen a later showing, after the main audience had dispersed. Late screenings always possessed this serene atmosphere. Scattered groups of viewers absorbed in their own worlds, settling in for the final presentations of the night. We located our seats effortlessly, positioned near the center of the auditorium. Previews flickered across the screen, a montage of forthcoming blockbusters and independent films. I paid minimal attention, already sinking into that pleasant pre-movie relaxation state that comes with dimmed lights and comfortable seating. Then my girlfriend Olivia leaned closer and whispered, "I'm feeling hungry after all." I turned toward her with a knowing smirk. "Didn't we just eat before arriving?" She shrugged, flashing that playful, innocent expression she always employed when wanting something. "I didn't think I'd be hungry, but now I am." I sighed, though I wasn't genuinely annoyed. "All right, I'll grab something. You stay put." "Are you certain?" she asked. Yeah, I'll be quick." I stood, stretched briefly, and navigated toward the aisle and exit. The contrast between the darkened theater and blazing lobby momentarily disoriented me. Bright lights, distant conversations, occasional electronic beeps from registers, and the pervasive aroma of buttered popcorn assaulted my senses. Several patrons milled about, some queuing for refreshments, others simply waiting for their films to begin. I joined the concession line, shifting my weight between feet while examining the overhead menu, though I already knew the standard options. That's when I heard someone call my name. "Hey, Adrian!" I turned reflexively, caught off guard. A man standing before me smiled as though we were acquainted. I blinked, trying to place him. Nothing registered. He appeared approximately my age, perhaps slightly rougher around the edges. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't identify what. Before I could inquire, he spoke again. "You don't remember me, huh?" I hesitated. "Should I?" He laughed casually. "Garrett, man. You remember Garrett, right?" The name gave me pause. Garrett. I did know him. We'd been close friends throughout high school, played sports together, shared the same social circle. After graduation, we drifted apart, pursuing different paths. It had been several years since our last encounter. Hearing his name relaxed me somewhat. If this guy knew Garrett, perhaps I had met him previously and simply forgotten. "He's here," the man said, grinning. "Just around the corner. He'd love to see you." I hesitated again. I still needed to purchase food for Olivia, but reconnecting with an old friend, that didn't sound unpleasant. "All right," I conceded, "but I need to be quick." "Won't take long," he assured me. He turned and began walking. I followed. We moved away from the central lobby area toward the quieter section of the cinema, down the corridor leading to smaller screening rooms. It wasn't an area I typically traversed, and as we ventured deeper, the noise from the main lobby faded behind us. Something about that abrupt silence made the hairs on my arms stand on end. We took one turn, then another. The lighting in this section was noticeably dimmer, more subdued. Fewer people, fewer exits. I began experiencing genuine unease. Then I saw them. At the far end of the hallway, near a single theater entrance, stood a small gathering of men, perhaps 3 or 4 of them. All wore ski masks. That was the moment every muscle in my body tensed. Even with their faces concealed, I knew with absolute certainty, none of them was Garrett. I halted. My pulse accelerated, my body rigid with sudden awareness. The masked figures all turned, not toward my guide, but directly at me. I swallowed hard, instinct screaming danger. Something was terribly wrong. The man ahead of me turned partially, gesturing for me to continue. "Come on, man. They're just over here." But I wasn't convinced anymore. Without speaking, I turned and walked away, not hastily, not panicking, just moving with deliberate purpose. I heard him call after me, his tone shifting slightly. "Yo, where are you going?" I offered no response. I walked straight back to the lobby, heart pounding furiously against my ribs. The moment I re-entered the crowded, bright space, I felt marginally safer, but I didn't pause. I returned directly to the concession line as though nothing unusual had transpired. Minutes later, I sensed eyes upon me. Glancing over, I spotted the same man reappearing at the corridor's edge. He peered around the corner, scanning the crowd. Our eyes locked briefly before he vanished back around the corner. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to remain composed. I collected the refreshments, returned to my theater, and slid into my seat beside Olivia, just as the film commenced. I didn't immediately tell her what had occurred. I wanted to believe the incident was concluded, that I had evaded whatever had been planned. But toward the movie's end, something compelled me to glance toward the entrance. I saw them again, two figures standing just inside the doorway, wearing ski masks, not watching the screen, but watching me. The moment our eyes met, they turned and departed. My blood ran cold. I checked the entrance repeatedly before the film concluded, but they didn't reappear. When the credits rolled, I finally related everything to Olivia. She listened with widening eyes, and when we left, I remained hyper-vigilant, scanning the lobby, the parking lot, everywhere. But they had vanished. That night, I called Garrett. He had no knowledge of what I described, but when I detailed the man who approached me, he hesitated. "Yeah, I think I know who that is," he said reluctantly. "Who?" I pressed. Garrett paused for an uncomfortably long moment before simply saying, "Stay away from him." That was all. I never discovered what those men wanted that night, but I know with absolute certainty. I walked away, and I remain profoundly grateful that I did. The peculiar thing about working night shifts at a movie theater is the eerie quietude that descends after the final showing concludes. During peak hours, the lobby pulsates with vitality. Customers ordering overpriced concessions, adolescents loitering near arcade machines, couples discreetly smuggling outside snacks. But by 11:30 p.m., the venue transforms into a phantom space. The neon glow from the refreshment counter still emanates. Digital promotional displays still flicker, but the human element vanishes. Tonight exemplified those desolate shifts. Only myself and Nathan remained scheduled for closing duties. Nathan, a slender, somewhat aloof young man several years my senior, predominantly kept to himself. We weren't precisely friends, yet we'd collaborated sufficiently to establish a comfortable routine. He managed projection equipment while I handled final cleanup, wiping surfaces, sweeping auditoriums, ensuring no patrons lingered unnoticed. Typically, the tranquility didn't disturb me, but occasionally, when just the two of us remained, the silence pressed too heavily against my consciousness. Tonight, that silence felt markedly different, oppressive, watchful. I dismissed the sensation and completed restocking candy at the concession counter. The final screening, a 9:45 horror film, had concluded over an hour ago, leaving only final theater inspections. Nathan had already deactivated the projectors and left me to complete the remaining tasks. "I'll be in the break room," he'd announced before disappearing behind the staff entrance. That left me isolated. I collected a broom and waste bag and proceeded toward Auditorium 6, the final venue requiring inspection. The theater lay in darkness except for the faint illumination from exit signs. Several half-consumed beverages and crumpled popcorn sacks littered the floor, but overall, it presented minimal challenges. I approached the front row and began sweeping, the familiar sound of bristles against carpet disrupting the stillness. Then I heard it, a door creaking open. I froze. The auditorium entrance remained just beyond view behind a dividing wall. I anticipated footsteps, voices, any indication of human presence, but received nothing. I peered cautiously over my shoulder. Nobody visible. Probably Nathan retrieving supplies from a nearby storage closet, I reasoned. I exhaled, dismissed my unease, and resumed sweeping. Several minutes passed. Just as I completed my task, I heard it again. The door opening, closing. I pivoted sharply, heart pounding. The entrance remained vacant. No movement. No sound. A nauseating sensation settled in my stomach. I forced myself toward the exit, scanning rows of seats one final time for confirmation. I reached the dividing wall and stepped through the doorway. That's when I saw him, a man standing directly inside the entrance, blocking my escape route. He was imposing, at least 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, clothed entirely in dark garments. His face remained partially obscured by shadows, but what I could discern disturbed me profoundly. Something about his posture, too rigid, too deliberate, triggered internal alarms. I struggled to maintain a calm facade. "Excuse me, can I assist you?" The man's mouth curved into an unsettling smile. "Yes," he replied softly. "Come here." He extended his arms as though expecting an embrace. Every instinct commanded me to flee. I retreated a step. "Sir, the theater is closed for the evening." He advanced a step. My breath caught. I turned to retreat deeper into the auditorium, but with 2 extensive strides, he reached me. One arm encircled my torso, another hand clamped over my mouth. I attempted to scream, but the sound emerged muffled. His grip tightened painfully, crushing me against his chest. His breath felt hot against my ear as he whispered, "Shh, don't complicate matters unnecessarily." I kicked, thrashed, bit his hand. He grunted but maintained his hold, dragging me toward the exit. I couldn't break free. His strength overwhelmed mine. I clawed at his forearms, twisted violently. Nothing succeeded. My lungs burned from panicked breathing, mine screaming silently. Then suddenly, footsteps. The door crashed open, and Nathan's voice sliced through my terror. "Hey! Release her immediately!" The man hesitated momentarily. Sufficient opportunity. I stomped his foot viciously, rammed my elbow into his ribs, and wrenched free from his grasp. Nathan charged forward. The two collided violently into the seating. I stumbled backward, gasping desperately for air, hands trembling as I extracted my phone and dialed emergency services. The confrontation escalated brutally. Nathan landed a powerful strike, but the assailant shoved him backward forcefully, sending him crashing against seats. Then the attacker bolted. By the time we rushed outside, sirens already wailed in the distance. The man sprinted toward a side exit, but flashing emergency lights flooded the parking area. Officers emerged, demanding he halt. He hesitated briefly before fleeing in the opposite direction. An officer tackled him. He struck the pavement violently, struggling and shouting incomprehensibly. Additional officers intervened. Within moments, they had him restrained. Nathan and I remained frozen at the entrance, watching incredulously. My legs weakened. My entire body quivered as adrenaline subsided and cold reality settled. If Nathan hadn't arrived when he did, I swallowed, refusing to contemplate that scenario. An officer approached, expression grave. "Are you both unharmed?" Nathan nodded. I mimicked him, though I questioned the truthfulness of my response. The officer's gaze shifted toward the handcuffed man. "We've been searching for him." Something in his tone sent chills through me. Nathan stiffened. "Who is he?" The officer glanced at me, then back to Nathan. "He's been stalking young women for weeks," he revealed. "But this represents his first physical assault." That night transformed everything. I resigned from the theater immediately afterward. Nightmares persist. The way he stood waiting, that terrible smile, and most disturbing, I remain ignorant regarding how long he had observed me before I noticed his presence, or how many nights prior he had lurked there, concealed in darkness, waiting. I never frequented cinemas during daytime hours. It seemed somehow unnatural, like intruding upon a time that didn't rightfully belong to me. Yet that afternoon, I had unexpected free time, and my 6-year-old son Caleb had been incessantly requesting to see Stellar Explorers 2 for weeks. The theater parking lot was half vacant when we arrived, most people occupied with work or educational responsibilities. Inside, the lobby felt eerily hollow, the customary evening bustle replaced by scattered families and retirees. The aroma of buttered popcorn and mechanical hum of beverage dispensers permeated the atmosphere. Caleb bounced excitedly as we purchased tickets. The adolescent cashier barely acknowledged us, attention fixed on his mobile device. Overhead lights emitted a faint buzzing sound. We located our seats effortlessly, center row, 5 positions from the aisle. Caleb eagerly devoured his children's snack combination while previews played. I reclined comfortably, savoring the plush seating. For the subsequent 90 minutes, everything proceeded normally, just father and son laughing at animated characters projected on an enormous screen. No stress, no concerns. Then we exited the theater, and she discovered us. We traversed the dimly illuminated corridor leading toward the exit. The carpet emanated a faint aroma of spilled beverages and stale popcorn. The venue remained nearly vacant, just a few parents shepherding their children outward. That's when I noticed her, a woman positioned near the exit, shifting her weight restlessly between feet. She appeared to be in her 50s, clothing slightly disheveled, brown hair tangled in peculiar clumps. Something about her posture seemed disturbing, a jittery, unsettled quality. As we approached the doors, she pivoted toward us, eyes wide and disturbingly eager. "Hey! Hey there!" she called, voice excessively loud. Instinctively, I drew Caleb closer. Hello?" I responded cautiously. She stepped forward, uncomfortably invasive of personal space. Her breath carried a sour odor, reminiscent of stale coffee mingled with something metallic. "Listen, I need transportation," she said, voice unsteady. "Just to my boyfriend's residence. It's nearby. I lack funds, but... Sorry, I can't assist." I interjected swiftly. My intuition screamed warnings to distance ourselves immediately. She persisted, not retreating. "Please. It's extremely close. I just need to arrive there. I apologize," I repeated more firmly. Caleb fidgeted beside me. "Daddy, let's go." I nodded. "Yes, buddy. We're leaving now." We pushed past her and entered the parking area. I sensed her behind us, her presence clinging to my consciousness. Glancing over my shoulder confirmed my suspicion. She followed us. The atmosphere felt warm with a gentle breeze. Our vehicle sat near the parking lot's center, surrounded by only a few other automobiles. I accelerated our pace, gripping Caleb's small hand firmly. Footsteps shuffled behind us. "Wait, please! I genuinely need assistance," she called. I provided no response. I unlocked the car, opened the door, and ushered Caleb inside. The woman continued approaching, hands twitching visibly at her sides. I entered the driver's seat, secured the doors, and started the engine. My pulse thundered in my ears. Then, as I reversed, something peculiar registered in my awareness. The woman walked toward another vehicle, her own car. She possessed transportation the entire time. She hadn't been stranded. She never required a ride. I observed through the rearview mirror as she entered a dark gray sedan. My mouth went dry. Then she pulled out and began following us. I maintained a neutral expression for Caleb's benefit. "Daddy, that lady was strange," he commented from the back seat. "Yes, buddy," I replied, striving to keep my tone light. "But don't worry, we're heading home now." I checked the mirror again. The gray sedan maintained a few car lengths between us. I turned right. She turned right. I veered left at the following intersection. She veered left. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, heartbeat accelerating. Was she genuinely following me home? I attempted to remain rational. Perhaps she genuinely had an acquaintance in my neighborhood. Perhaps I was being unreasonably paranoid. Then, at a four-way intersection, a vehicle pulled out between us, disrupting her pursuit. I exhaled slowly. By the time I reached our street, the gray sedan had vanished. I felt foolish for my concern, until she found us again. Caleb dashed inside, already recounting his favorite movie moments. My wife Madeline greeted us with a warm smile. "How was it?" "Good," I replied, attempting to dismiss the bizarre encounter. "Popcorn everywhere, but he thoroughly enjoyed it." I didn't mention the woman, saw no purpose in concerning Madeline. An hour passed, then two. I nearly forgotten the incident, until the gray sedan parked directly in front of our residence. My stomach plummeted. Madeline noticed my expression. "Who's that?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." The woman sat in her vehicle, staring intently at our home. Something shifted within me, fear transforming into indignation. I refused to permit her to lurk outside indefinitely. I ventured outside. The moment I appeared on the porch, she lowered her window. "Hey," she said, voice unnaturally soft. "I'm terribly sorry. My friend resides near here." She gestured vaguely down the street. I advanced closer, maintaining steadiness in my voice. "Why did you follow me home?" She blinked rapidly. "Followed? I didn't." I clenched my jaw. "You did." She offered a partial smile. "You have a very attractive residence." Something about her phrasing sent chills through my body. Then she exited her vehicle. I retreated instinctively. She walked past me, continuing along the sidewalk until disappearing around the corner. But her car remained, for hours. By nightfall, I'd nearly convinced myself she had departed permanently. Then the pounding commenced, loud, desperate fists hammering against our front door. Caleb screamed from his bedroom. Madeline clutched my arm. "Call the authorities," I instructed. I was already dialing. Through the peephole, I observed her. Wild eyes, features contorted with unreadable emotion. "Let me in," she shrieked. My hands trembled as I related everything to the dispatcher. The pounding persisted. Then suddenly, sirens, red and blue lights flashed through our windows. She spun toward them, raising her hands as officers converged. They restrained her against the vehicle. I exhaled for the first time in hours. The police removed her from the premises. They informed me she possessed a record, primarily minor offenses, but documented history of unstable behavior. I never encountered her again, but for weeks afterward, I flinched at knocks on the door. For months, I verified locks repeatedly each night, and for years I've wondered what might have transpired had I permitted her entry. Friday evenings consistently attracted crowds to Westlake cinemas, among the finer establishments in the region, immaculate, contemporary, featuring those luxurious reclining seats that elevated movie watching into a genuine experience. For most patrons, it represented an opportunity to unwind, to momentarily escape weekly tribulations. For myself and my girlfriend Rebecca, it constituted our cherished date night destination. That evening, we had meticulously arranged everything. A late showing of Whispering Shadows, a slow-burning psychological thriller garnering enthusiastic critical acclaim. Being less commercial fare, we anticipated a manageable audience. We arrived shortly after 9:30. The theater lobby hummed with energy. Teenagers congregating near arcade games, couples strolling hand in hand awaiting concessions, the pervasive aroma of buttery snacks hanging heavily in the atmosphere. Soft mechanical whirring from beverage dispensers and subdued conversations created a comforting ambiance. Rebecca nudged me playfully as we approached the ticket counter. "Extra butter?" I smiled knowingly. "Obviously." We procured substantial popcorn, beverages, and proceeded toward Theater 7. Pre-screening advertisements already played when we entered. The auditorium stood approximately half-occupied, clusters of viewers distributed throughout middle sections, occasional solitary attendees positioned toward the rear. We selected seats in the penultimate row, ideally situated, neither excessively proximate to the screen nor directly adjacent to the aisle. As I settled comfortably, I sensed someone slipping into the row behind us. Initially, I dismissed it, merely another late arrival. But when I glanced backward, I noticed a young man seated directly behind me. He appeared perhaps early 20s, possibly several years my junior. He wore a dark hooded sweatshirt, hood raised over his head, casting shadows across his features. His posture seemed excessively casual, somehow discordant, as though he didn't quite belong. I dismissed my unease. The lights dimmed. The feature commenced. For a period, everything proceeded normally. First indications arose approximately 15 minutes into the film. Something small struck Rebecca's shoulder. She flinched slightly, but showed no further reaction beyond brushing at her sweater. I barely registered the incident. Then another popcorn piece landed in her lap. I frowned, turning slightly. The hooded figure stared fixedly at the screen, motionless. Had he thrown anything, he demonstrated no indication. Perhaps accidental, I reasoned. Then another piece struck her hair. No accident. This time, I twisted fully in my seat, establishing direct eye contact. He didn't avert his gaze, didn't speak, merely smirked. I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice deliberately low. "Stop that. Now!" He demonstrated no reaction, offered no apology, simply stared for another moment before redirecting his attention toward the screen. I exhaled slowly, facing forward again. For the subsequent 20 minutes, nothing occurred. The individual remained silent, no additional popcorn, no further disruptions. I began relaxing, then Rebecca leaned close and whispered, "I need to visit the restroom." She stood carefully, navigating past adjacent seats. As she passed the young man, he emitted a low, sharp whistle. My stomach clenched. I turned immediately, eyes narrowing. "What exactly is your problem?" He grinned without answering, making exaggerated talking gestures with his hand, fingers opening and closing like a puppet, mockingly. That crossed my final threshold of tolerance. I leaned closer, voice barely exceeding a whisper. "You want to resolve this outside?" Momentarily, his confident expression faltered. Then, seemingly deciding the confrontation unworthy, he raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, man. Just enjoying the film." I maintained my glare briefly before turning away. Rebecca returned minutes later, and I described the interaction. She frowned concernedly. "Let's simply ignore him. We'll depart soon enough." I nodded agreement, but something instinctual warned this situation remained unresolved. The film concluded shortly after midnight. Patrons gradually filtered out, stretching and conversing as they navigated toward the lobby. Rebecca and I lingered momentarily, allowing the crowd to dissipate before proceeding to the parking area. Outside, the air felt cool. The previously packed lot had substantially cleared. Our vehicle was parked distantly, beneath a dimly illuminated street lamp. As we walked, I sensed observation. Then I saw him, the hooded individual from the theater, leaning against an automobile with 3 companions, all approximately his age. They conversed and laughed, but upon noticing us, their dialogue slowed noticeably. Then the young man smirked and called out, "Hey, tough guy." I ignored his provocation. He called again, this time incorporating a degrading slur. My fists involuntarily clenched, but I maintained our pace. Then, just as we reached our vehicle, I heard rapid footsteps approaching. I turned barely in time to witness him closing the distance. He halted several feet away, hands concealed in pockets. "Relax," he said, smiling unnervingly. "Just wanted to chat." His insincerity was transparent. Rebecca grasped my arm anxiously. "Let's go." I unlocked the vehicle, maintaining visual contact as we entered. The moment I engaged the ignition, however, the young men entered their own automobile and followed us. Initially, I hoped coincidence explained their pursuit, but as we merged onto the street, their vehicle maintained uncomfortably close proximity, intentionally, unmistakably tracking us. They began swerving slightly, repeatedly accelerating threateningly, clearly attempting intimidation. Rebecca's grip tightened on her seat. "What should we do?" My mind raced frantically. "I think we should return to the theater." She nodded rapidly. I executed a sharp turn. They followed without hesitation. No remaining doubt existed. They were actively pursuing us. I exceeded speed limits, heart pounding violently, but regardless of velocity, they maintained position directly behind us. Then ahead, I spotted a service station, brightly illuminated, several vehicles parked near the pumps. "Hold tight," I muttered. I swerved abruptly into the lot, parking directly beside the entrance. Momentarily, I believed we'd succeeded. Their vehicle decelerated significantly. Then they pulled into a nearby space. Rebecca exhaled shakily. "They're waiting." We remained motionless for what seemed eternity. Then one passenger exited, not the hooded antagonist, but one of his companions. He approached leisurely, hands concealed in pockets, as though possessing limitless time. I recognized then, remaining would inevitably escalate dangerously. I made an instantaneous decision. As he neared, I engaged reverse abruptly, then accelerated forcefully. The individual jumped backward, startled. Their vehicle engine roared to life, but I was already merging onto the main thoroughfare. I maintained maximum speed until reaching the police station. We reported everything: the harassment, the pursuit, the threatening behavior. Officers treated our account with appropriate gravity. They located the vehicle through security cameras, identified the occupants. Apparently, the hooded instigator and one companion had received previous bans from the establishment, suspicious activities, harassment of customers. But this incident differed significantly. This was targeted, deliberate stalking. They received warnings, merely warnings, no arrests. That occurred months ago. We continue attending that theater occasionally, but whenever I park in that lot, I instinctively scan my surroundings, half expecting to glimpse him again. Thus far, he hasn't reappeared. I fervently hope that situation persists.